Jesus says, here's what I'm asking you to do as Christians. Even when you experience hate, love. Listen to what he says. Here's a couple of things of how you respond when someone's pushing the hate button. Number one, he says, love your enemies. I love that all throughout the biblical text, God commands us to love. You remember when Jesus was asked, what's the greatest of all the commandments? And he says, everything that we taught you, everything in the Old Testament, all of the law and everything that the prophets taught boils down to this. Love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, and love your neighbors as yourself. God is very clear. He even says in the New Testament that if you say that you love God whom you've not seen, but cannot love your brother and sister who you have seen, then the text says that you are a liar and you don't follow God. And God over and over and over and over commands us to love, which suggests, watch this, that love is not a feeling. Because God can't command you to feel anything, but what God can command you to do is to live a life of faith. So let me say this, that love isn't an emotion. It's not a feeling. For God, love is an act of faith. So God doesn't command us to feel love for one another. He commands us to show love for one another, because it's not something that he's waiting and asking for us to feel. He wants us to operate in faith. So let me ask this question. When it comes to loving people who sometimes can seem unlovable or don't love you, what if your assignment is not to be happy, but to be holy? What if even in the midst of everything that's going on, our assignment as believers, as Christians, as those who follow Christ, is not to be happy about what everyone says or what everything that's going on, but our assignment is to be holy. Number one, Jesus says, if you're going to respond to the hate button being pushed, love your enemy. Number two, he says, pray for them. Oftentimes, I said this in the article, that hate is a matter of projected pain. Sometimes the reason why people are being hateful towards you, the reason why you have haters, the reason why people are pushing that button is because somewhere deep inside there's a pain that is unresolved. Here's a question I have. What type of pain do you have to have in your heart and in your life that causes you to only feel good about yourself when you make other people feel bad? That's some kind of pain. That is some kind of trauma. That is some kind of hurt. And maybe Jesus is asking us to pray for our enemies because he wants us, watch this, to be sensitive to the fact that there may be some unresolved trauma in their life to where they are unable to feel good about themselves without making someone else feel bad about themselves. Man, that's some kind of pain. And if Jesus is correct, and I believe that he is, I believe everything that Jesus says is true. If Jesus is correct, then man, you got to admit that that kind of pain requires somebody to be praying for them, even if they don't show you any love. Jesus says, pray for them. That's a deep wound that many people carry, that maybe if we took the call to prayer a little bit more serious, it might actually move on the hearts of people who've been showing hate. Okay, number three, here's what Jesus says when the hate button is being pushed, when you're being hated on, when people tend to overtly or even undercover hate on you or have something negative to say about you or seem to be displeased with you. Here's the third thing that Jesus says: be a servant. Be a servant, because service, check this out, keeps you humble. That's why all throughout the text you even see Jesus serving. He says that the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve one another. That's why you see Jesus bending down and washing the feet of his disciples, because he's modeling for us the need to serve, because service keeps us humble. Why is that important, Pastor? Because humility, watch this, drives away hate. If you want to make sure that you don't return the same energy of hate when someone's giving you hate, continue to serve. Because you cannot, watch this, have humility and hatred residing in the same heart. So Jesus says, be a servant. Number four, if you want to know how to respond, be generous. make sacrifices. All throughout the Old Testament, we see this principle where they make sacrifice for sins. And it's not just a sacrifice for saying, God, I'm sorry for what is done wrong. But sacrifice, watch this, has been designed to pay for sin, but also to simultaneously restore relationship. I've often told people that if you are making sacrifices in your life that are tearing you away from your family and keeping you away from your children, then that's not a sacrifice, that's selfishness. Real sacrifice, as we see in the biblical text, even as we see Jesus sacrificing his life, always restores relationship. Why is that important? Because if I'm going to respond to when I'm being hated on, if I'm going to respond to the hatred that we see in the world, I've got to be generous. That's why Jesus says, if someone takes your shirt, give them your coat too. Be generous. Go over and above, because when you make the sacrifice, you are saying to God that I am, to the best of my ability, attempting to restore relationship. Here's why that's important, because when you make sacrifices, when you build an altar, so to speak, a proverbial altar on your heart, and you're generous and you make sacrifices, watch this, you cannot, listen to me, have a large altar and a large ego at the same time. Yeah, when I'm generous, when I serve, when I make sacrifices, even in the face of hatred, what it does is it allows me to build a large enough altar on my heart to drive out the large ego that I also have in my heart. And so Jesus says, if you want to push back against hatred, be generous, make sacrifices, go over and above, and continue to be generous so that you can build an altar that pushes out your own ego. Here it is, last thing. If you're going to respond to hate, be a Christian. This is probably one of the toughest things to do. Notice that Jesus says that people who don't even believe in me love people who love them. The run-of-the-mill sinners do that. That's par for the course for people who don't even believe. But people who follow me, people who claim to be a Christian, people who claim to be Christ followers, go over and above, and their response to hate is never hate. Their response to hate is to continue to love people despite how they treat you. That's tough, my brothers and sisters. And I know it, but what Jesus is essentially saying is, if you're going to respond to hate, you can be angry. He says you can be frustrated. You can even, at times, be a little bit fearful about how the world is going and what's going to happen. But one thing that you should be at all times, no matter the hatred that you face. Listen to me, lean in. Be a Christian. Online, in your dialogue, in your discussion, in what you post, in the discussions you choose not to have, and how you choose to respond to things that you disagree with, and even in your assumptions about who's not saying what and who's not speaking up. Be wise. Be angry. You can be frustrated. But what you always have to be, no matter what, is be a Christian. Jesus says that those who follow me, they don't return the same energy that's given to them. That's why Dr. King said, I've decided to stick with love, because this thing called hate is too big of a burden to carry. So I want to encourage you, no matter what it looks like in this world, no matter what you're facing, no matter what the times look like, be the people of God. Be a Christian. Love those who don't love you. Love those who may even be hating on you. Because that's what's going to be the thing that actually changes the world.